So let yourself just bring in all that has happened in the last hour and a half. Bring it back to you. Let yourself touch it. And now in this place, we're going to engage in a contemplative dialogue, meaning that you stay in mindfulness. And as you are called, just let us know how you're feeling, what questions you have. Keep it succinct. And then as you listen and let soak in what other people say, we're not going to respond right now. We're just going to take it all in. And we'll have a brief discussion in about 10 minutes. So a few more people are coming in right now, so we'll let them get settled. So when you're called, just speak up. One sentence or so of what you're feeling, and if you have a question, or if a question came to you that you want to hold for yourself. Just speak it out.
My question. Sorry. My question is, how can we create more space for the gray areas within us so that we may all be held in all of our complexities?
Thank you. can just raise your hand and Leslie will bring the mic to you.
Is it possible to do an activity like that with middle school age kids who are prone to teasing and posturing and all of that stuff? And if so, what kind of parameters would you suggest to make sure that it stays feeling safe?
I feel thrilled right now. You know. Yeah, because I go on Facebook a lot, and a lot of people organize themselves around a lot of I don't know, a lot of hurt and pain with the things that they post, and to be here with people who are just working on themselves and trying to heal their community through just doing the work. It feels good, and I feel inspired and motivated to keep doing what I need to do for me. And that's it.
Question I have is, how do we lessen the shame and guilt that we feel about who we are and where we come from? Instead, celebrate those things while practicing empathy and love for other people.
My question is, I felt a lot of deep compassion for a lot of other people in the room during that time period, and I know it'll wear off. How do we keep it from wearing off?
I just want to share an observation I had of myself in doing the exercise, because I've done it a few times before, and I realized that the reason I really connect to it is because I always want to have a reason to step forward for some reason, and I think it's because I value being seen and understood in complex ways, and so I want to keep using this exercise as a tool for my work as well.
How do we befriend the uncomfortable feelings of being different?
Specifically, kind of from an education perspective, how do you think we can use mindfulness to also deal with the environmental crisis, not just race relations and community and gender relations, but I think those things actually are massively tied in and connected to the environmental crisis and the way that we essentially are choosing certain countries' wellness and well-being over others.
I'm curious about how to translate these concerns and this awareness with 9-year-olds who do have a capacity and some understanding for this, but how do you translate that to them?
Leslie, remind me of our time before.
We have until 4, so we have 20 more minutes right now.
Including the diversity contemplation or before the diversity contemplation?
Before the diversity
Okay,
contemplation.
fantastic, thank you. other questions or comments to offer to the group?
It's my feeling that children, no matter what age, are very capable of connecting to the source of themselves. And in my experience, it's they're probably closer to it than we are in many respects. So just creating the space for them to go there, because I've seen it firsthand just to watch some of these children in mindful moments. They're just blissed out, and that's wonderful to see. So I think we create the space. But one thing I do know, things take time. Especially, I'm a school teacher, and it really takes time. You just can't expect everything at once. But if you're patient with the process, it really works.
I would add to that, finding ways to bring creativity and your own imagination, paired with mindfulness as a way to connect with whoever you're working with, but definitely young people. That's a way in, but with everyone really.
I think at this point I'd like to invite our other teachers to comment, to state whatever is coming up.
So I'm going to speak to a few of the questions that came up with what's coming up for me. So I'll just kind of go through them as I took notes. So there was a question around creating space within ourselves for the gray areas and to hold our complexities, and another question on befriending the uncomfortable, and another question around keeping our compassion, being able to hold that space of compassion that we feel. And for me, all of those things connect directly back to mindfulness practice. Mindfulness is about creating this sense of space within ourselves so we can hold the challenging stuff, but also recognize the really beautiful stuff that's there too. And it's about not feeling boxed in or constrained. And so I love the visualization that Thich Nhat Hanh uses a lot, is that of the infinite blue sky, the spacious blue sky. And there's this saying that he has that I think I mentioned it the last time I was here, but it's really one of my favorites, around if you have a cup of water and you put a spoon of salt in it, the water's salty. But if you have a lake and there's a little bit of salt in it, the lake's not salty. So our hearts, when there's pain and our hearts are small, we suffer. So we must grow our hearts large. And the way we grow our hearts is through understanding, through engaging in the dialogue and the reflection that we're all trying to do today. And with the keeping that feeling of compassion. So I'm going to give a plug for Irina Weissman, who, if any of you know who she is, she's a wonderful Dharma teacher. And my husband and I were at East Bay Meditation Center last night, and she just gave this beautiful talk. We mark on our calendars whenever she's there that we try and go. But she was talking a lot about really connecting with the moments where we feel, where we are having wholesome experiences, when we feel genuine compassion and gratitude. So in our day, it might just happen for a moment, like, I feel the wind, or that tree is beautiful, or such a beautiful smile my student has. But the more we can, not just let those be a blip, but to sink into them and take them in, the more we can grow those seeds of compassion within ourselves. And there was another comment or question around befriending the uncomfortable. And again, I feel like that's what the core of mindfulness is about, is making friends with the uncomfortable, not pushing it away. And that definitely connects to what comes up for us around race and around oppression. And the more I can just recognize, what's coming up and not push it away, the more I'm able to really grow as myself. And another thing Arena said last night in this just beautiful talk, hopefully it's on Dharma Seed, so you can listen to it. But she was talking about how she was able to access forgiveness for even things that seemed really horrible, because she connected with times in her life when she was unconscious, that she too had that potential for being harmful. And in doing that, she was able to cultivate this sense of forgiveness. And for me, that was just a huge jewel from her talk that I took with me when I think about forgiveness and really challenging situations to connect with that. Well, I've been pretty unconscious too in my life. And then there was 2 questions around doing this work with middle school students and relevance for 9-year-olds. And I would just, there's a ton of resources out there. And I'd say that, Roger talked earlier about agreements. And, when I think about social emotional learning, it's so important to set the stage and create the space in your classroom of safety before engaging with an activity like this. So doing what you need to do to make sure that there's agreements in the classroom that are co-constructed with students, and that students are able to hold each other accountable for them. And I've done it with middle school kids, and so I think it is possible, but given the topics, you want to really make sure that there is that sense of safety. And I think with 9-year-olds too, there's definitely lots of possibility to engage deeply, because they too, I remember when I was 9, and so this is kind of ridiculous. So my mom used to enter me in beauty pageants when I was little. This is like so embarrassing, but I remember being 8 years old and being in one, and this girl being like, "Oh, you're ugly because you are dark skinned," and it was like such a moment, because I didn't really even understand anything about my identity, and this girl was like, "Oh, well, you're ugly, and you will never win, and you have dark skin," and it's just a memory that I have from being 8. And so, and here I am 34, and I can still connect to that moment. So I think creating a safe space where our children are able to be able to share their moments of feeling hurt, and letting them know that honoring the fact that it's okay to feel that way, and letting them know that they are beautiful, can be so powerful. So, thank you. And if anyone else has some questions and things they want to speak to.
I just wanted to speak to, I know there were a couple of people whom were thinking about bringing this exercise or these types of issues to young children, 9, 10. And actually the first several times that I experienced or participated in crossing the line was with 9 and 10-year-olds. And this was with Mosaic Project. The Mosaic Project is an outdoor school, and it's actually a week-long program that happens during the school year. I don't know if you work, if you work with a school, you can certainly, you can certainly look up the Mosaic Project, and your school might be able to visit the outdoor school. But the way in which it's done, it's definitely those questions were the juicy questions that the 9 and 10-year-olds they started there, and it's the finale event. It's so they spend a week first really building culture, setting a container, building culture, and holding each other accountable, for that culture, and learning how to do it. Really being taught conflict transformation. It's really a beautiful experience to see these young people saying that this is the best experience they've ever had in their lives. And you know, it's not like it's all flowers and roses. It's no joke. You know, some of them throw themselves on the floor screaming and crying. You know, when you start to get in there, and they don't want to go home. And it's also around diversity. So you'll have kids who, you know, safari in Africa and vacation in the Hamptons, and mixed with, you know, children whom, you know, they'd rather stay at camp than go home. So it's really very interesting to see them all at the end, you know, supporting each other in this culture. So it takes work to get to that place, really only 7 days, 6 days, and then doing cross the line together and seeing how they all open up and communicate about it. So yes, it can be done.
Maud, did you want to say anything?
Very simply, just to add a little bit to what have been said so far, is that we tend to forget that as a human race, we wallow more on negativity. It's in us. So if we go through a bad experience, or if we are told a bad word, like "you're ugly," that word stays with us longer than when we are given positive words. And so it's not just doing mindfulness by itself, but then realizing as we do mindfulness that as these words come up, how are we feeling about them? How are we reacting to them? And just being aware that there is some stuff that we are dealing with, rather than just saying we are just doing mindfulness because we're trying to be this or that. But realizing there is negativity in our lives, whether it's from our own families, whether it's from society, whether it's from our age group as we were growing up.
Bob, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
Would you raise your hand if you're a teacher of teenagers or work with teenagers? Okay. All right. Well, okay, to not get too much in my soapbox. So I taught English and U.S. history in 8th grade for 30 years. Retired. The first thing you have to do is get rid of the textbook, the history textbooks. They are poison. They are heavy. You will never learn diversity. You will never learn how to hold the ambiguity of this and that through a textbook. You can create college-style readers if you have access to your copy machine. Saved my career. And there's much literature. Teenagers do not want to talk directly about this stuff. I mean, there was no majority group in my classroom. For them to talk directly was challenging. On the other hand, they would talk about characters and stories, and they would write about those characters, and they would write very provocative things, and I would choose the things to read out loud. So they educated each other on the various relationships and dynamics that existed both in U.S. history, but also in characters in, intercultural books that we read. And then I could choose ones to read. They want to go, who wrote that? I'd say, well, the person's free to raise their hand, but it's anonymous here. It's about the words. So there's a lot you can do to mix it up. And I taught meditation. I just couldn't call it that 30 years ago. Every day, at the beginning of every class period, we did meditation and contemplations, but I'll stop. Can be done.
So any other from the audience like to contribute to the questions we heard or to something else that's come up for you?
Share a resource.
Great.
There's a book called The Conscious Parent, and it's written by Shefali Sabari, and she talks about transforming ourselves and empowering our children. Her focus is on our own personal development and the triggers that are tripped in us when our children behave a certain way. Why we react the way we do when they're simply being a child. So I don't have children, but I've been in education for 30 years. And I have to say it's a riveting read. And it's helping me to heal my own childhood pain, because she transforms our thinking when we take a look at why we respond the way we do to certain words. So I have to say it is an amazing book. The Dalai Lama wrote the foreword, and he highly spoke about her experiences and what she's done internationally. So that's my plug. The Conscious Parent. She wrote two, The Conscious Parent, and there's another, Out of Control, why we shouldn't why disciplining our children does not work and what does.
I would just like to offer up that I think it would work quite well in K through 12 is the role playing that Bob mentioned, the literature, and I have in college students, they read a history text, but they have to create characters from that history text, and then that are different than their own identity. And then they have to present and speak from that character, so it's a form of perspective taking. And I think if they're reading literature, they can take on those roles and they can play act them out. And it gives them practice in the cognitive skill of perspective taking. We talk a lot about empathy and compassion in the mindfulness world, but really in the public setting, I'm more concerned about the cognitive. Do they have the ability to ask the questions, to think forward about what do I know about you, what don't I know? How could I really understand your perspective from your view? What do I need to do? So giving practice to doing that is, I think, a gateway to empathy and compassion. But it gets us in the door, and kids can do that very well. So anyway, I just offer that up as a way to, and they can actually have the difficult dialogues through the other characters and practice responding through the other characters and then become reflective about what happened. So.